So it holds it without change. Because when you describe something in a poetic manner, the rhythm and the grammar and so on has to stay the same. And therefore the piece of knowledge itself would be transmitted throughout the ages from one person to the other intact. This is fascinating. And this is a great discovery. But the issue is not this. The issue is that the next highest afterward is the various other informations which you find here and there, and then we discover about science, and discover about technology and so on. So really, it's a very difficult job. And therefore, those of you who have influence in institutions and universities and so on, and philanthropists who could finance, we would like very much to have some strategy and some prioritization of which manuscript to be edited. You know, try to edit, to start with, look at manuscripts. If you want to know about women's manuscripts, try to look at manuscripts that have no author, no name, because most likely it would be a woman, right? And some of the women, when they wrote, they even chose some false names, okay? And sometimes some names are taken out by the scribe or by the shop, the commercial people who want to sell manuscripts. They try to do some cheating. You know, they think that because of the latter ages, they do that afterward. They take the name out. Now, and I think a priority, if you want to know about the role of women, you have to search for them in the remaining 5 million. If you want to have a priority about science, about various other important subjects, because you need, get your generation, you need to discover your stake. You are a shareholder. Our societies in the Muslim world, they have a stake, they are a shareholder in the present day civilization. Today's civilization is like a huge building, like this mosque, right? Okay, you know this mosque has been built by His Majesty the Sultan, right? Funded it. But do you know the people who actually built it? The decorators, the plumbers, the bricklayers, the people who have sweated day and night trying to get this job done. You don't know that. You probably know the name of the company that have it. You know. That's all. Well, it's the same thing as that modern civilization has been built by the men and women from various parts of the world through history. Each of them does their own contribution, and that's what we have today. So in order to find out our role, you've got to dig into history and find out your ancestors, what they have contributed. And we are discovering quite a lot of very interesting things. We discover the contributions of various nations and so on. In fact, we find out that men and women of not only Muslim, but non-Muslims, right, worked together with the Muslims in the Muslim civilization, and they were men and women. Now, so we then got interested in the position of women because of the Rihana, right? Because it's very important, you know, if you get somebody like him to say, had I not, you know, it's because of Rihana, that is a great recognition. Now, we know how important people who help you, this book that we're talking about, 1001 Inventions. Now, my name appeared to it. The people accuse me of being the author of it. I'm not really the author of it in reality, right? I'm getting the credit, right? But you know how many people who have worked to get that book? Almost 100 people, right? When professors publish publications in international journals and, you know, when they write papers and so on, they don't necessarily be the only single person whose name appears there. There are a lot of students, a lot of people who have actually helped. I call my PhD students and research students, they're my slaves. They are because they work for you. They dig information for us. And then you help to supervise. At the end, they produce a thesis, but then out of the thesis, we go and publish some work. Similarly, those great people in the past, like Biruni, they have had a support group. And they work and they write and search for them and discuss with them and so on. So there must have been a great contribution by women as well. We find that some manuscripts, they actually show, attempts to show some women. We discovered that women appear in manuscripts. And in this particular picture, you find that women are sitting on the adjacent room, and they are listening to a sheikh or a professor, in this case a Sheikh Bahauddin, and in the city of Balkh in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. So we find that there are, and then of course you find teachers, they actually teach women directly. We also find reference to men and women sitting in one room, and in this particular case, women are sitting in the front, right? Because in many times, I go to various meetings and so on. For some reason, automatically, women at the back, right? And okay, fine. There is actually a comedian in the United States. She's a Muslim, and she came to England, and she appears on TV as the first comedian Muslim woman. They asked her a question. I'm sorry, I have to give some of these jokes, but I'm trying to send some messages here. And they asked her, they said, she said, I was asked, why women always walk behind men, behind Muslim men. They always look. And she said, well, because they look a lot better from behind. So, but there are odd occasions when you find, oops, there is, well, of course, each tradition, each nation have their own way of protecting their moral, code and so on. There are also women who actually work very closely as assistants, particularly in the field of medicine. This picture here is one of the great physicians in the Ottoman physician, Sharafuddin Sabunjoglu. He's written enormous number about surgery and so on. And there are two ladies standing there who are his medical assistants and so on. In the reference, there are a lot of ladies who go around with physicians and doctors in hospitals and wards, and they help and they study and so on. We see this even in Abu al-Qasim al-Zahrawi, as old as about 1,000 years ago in Andalus, because he refers to women. When he takes them around, when he goes around patients, he refers to women who are taking notes and looking at the patients. So, and then this is a very, we come to another, we get women who build great institutions. Now this is University of Al-Qarawiyyin, right? And in Fes, in Morocco. It still functions as a university. And this was built, it was not only a donation of money, like great many women do. They receive money, they say, okay, build this mosque, build this hospital. But no, she says she didn't do that. She didn't do that only. She actually supervised the project. One of the main project designs, she said, is to have every part of this building must be made out of the land itself. So you don't import any stone, even the water has to be dug from the land. And she has project managed it. Now the history says that on the day of inauguration, when she pushed the shovel on the ground to start the project, she started fasting. Right? And she continued fasting every day until the project finished. One of the riwayat, one of the historical narrations, they say it took 13 years to finish. Right? Now this is some woman. She was 23 years of age in the year 859. This is a lot more than 100 years ago. And her sister built a mosque, Jami', about 5 kilometers away. Right? But she started the building of a Jami'ah. The Jami'ah, the feminine, my name is Salim. If I was a girl, I would be called Salima. So this is the Jami' and Jami'ah. So there's a very close link between the two. And the concept of university, can you imagine, that the first university in the world, which still exists today, functioning as a university, that must have such a viable project, right, surviving all these years, was built by a woman, a Muslim woman. Now this must be a very powerful message, actually, which completely takes the stereotype. First of all, everybody thinks that, they say, universities, well, there must be They must have started in the West, you know, maybe perhaps Oxford, Cambridge, or Sorbonne, and so on. Some people who tried, you know, say, oh, actually the first university is Al-Azhar, Jami' Al-Azhar. Actually it isn't, it's Al-Qarawiyyin. But the fact that it is built by a woman, and her inspiration and her aspirations, which is not just to be a place for worship or a place to study fiqh, but a place to look after the sajid, not just to build the masajid. It's to build the sajid, the person who has to learn, and bringing in various types of knowledge together. You know, that not only studying the Quran and the Hadith and so on and fiqh, but bring in other subjects in. And this is hence the word jami'. And the word university is a translation of that, because it's to do with universal education. Bring universal people. People can be from anywhere in the world to go and study in that. And that is the concept. In fact, the most important definition of the functions of university is that it is like a stool with 3 legs, right? You know, like a chair with 3 legs. And these 3 legs is to teach undergraduates and postgraduate teaching. The second is to research into problems of society, besides society. And the third is continuous education. Some people call it mid-career education, but some people call it lifelong education. These 3 important functions of a university have been set up from those years. Now, we don't want to go in too much into the university idea, but you know, the chair, the baccalaureate, بحق الرواية, converting to baccalaureate, the chair, you know, I have a chair in mechanical engineering. This comes in from those years. Even some people say that the mortarboard, which people wear, you know, students wear, and the gown is the symbol, is it bisht? Huh? Bisht, right? The gown is the gown of the scholar. You know, this is the, you become sheikh, or you become a sheikha, you know, when you put that on. But also this flat thing that you wear, there are stories that tell us from history that this was actually the Quran in those days. That you put the Quran on your head, and then you give an oath to behave yourself, and so that it's not only you're getting a bihaq al-riwaya degree, but you're also going to have become a useful member of society, and that your aim in life is to be useful to people, right? So that you don't misuse this certificate and this qualification and become and do something good, something bad, and you bring in bad reputation to the professor who gave it to you. So I now like to go into other ladies who have made great, you know, contributions in civil engineering and project management. We have another lady that many people know about, but they don't realize how significant she is. Don't try to read this, by the way. This was I just picked it up to remind me, but forget about it. Just think of the name. It's Zubaydah bint Ja'far al-Mansur. There's a letter T is finishing there, and she's the wife of Harun al-Rashid, right? The famous Harun al-Rashid, the great, the one that he was known to have said to the cloud, "You can reign anywhere in the world, and your crops will come to me." Let's imagine the vast empire that he was ruling. His wife, she was almost divorced because of taking so much money from him to build a fantastic project. And this project is what we call the highway between Baghdad and Mecca. Nowadays, when you have a highway, you have motorway or a highway, you want to have service stations along the road, right? You drive, you run out of petrol, or you want to have rest place, or you have to sleep somewhere, drink, eat. The caravans to go to Hajj from Baghdad all the way to Mecca, right, will face a problem, where to stop, where to sleep, and so on. She has built service stations all the way from Mecca to Baghdad. She nearly ruined Harun al-Rashid. But anyway, she continued after his death. Fantastic lady, imagine. And she was involved in the project management as well, not just to give money, following it up and making sure. And some of them are still available. This is one of them, and still available now. You go to Mecca, you just go a little bit to the north of Mecca, then you reach a spring, and they're called Nabi' Zubaydah. And this Nabi' Zubaydah feeds into the people tested that the water from Nabi' Zubaydah, right, which she dug up, it goes to Zamzam also. So and there is also Nabi' Zubaydah or Darb Zubaydah, which is known from Baghdad. In Kufa, you go to Kufa, you go a little bit outside of Kufa, they call it Darb Zubaydah. A huge project. Can you imagine, in those days to do this? So I think that this lady was definitely very, very unique lady. There is another interesting lady, which I have to vary in various subjects. This is to do with the building of a very sophisticated device. This sophisticated device is called astrolabe. Now, the astrolabe, or in Arabic, istarlab. The astrolabe is almost like a computer, but mechanical computer, with circular discs made out of copper or brass. Almost like a CD-ROM, the DVD, the CD-ROM, and you put it in the computer, very much like, but except that you don't read it by electronic Persia and India and into Europe, and they found how the women were treated. Men, they sort of liked because women were effectively treated as, how would I say, as inferior to men. And they would use some aspects of the Quran and Hadith to satisfy their masculine behavior, because you can cherry pick certain ayat and a certain so on without looking at the overall. You can then dominate. Of course, الرجال قوامون على النساء and things like that. But the position of women began to distort, and the balance that I spoke about in the early years of Islam has been tipped, unfortunately, in some countries. Now, of course, speaking about that, you get women who have been kings and have been queens, like Daifa Khatun. Daifa Khatun was the daughter of a king, and then she became the wife of a king, and then she became the mother of a king, and then she became a queen herself in Halab. Right. Great lady. Her life is worth studying because she's built a number of institutions and so on. We see here that some modern depiction of women out in the fields. I went to Morocco the other day, in a place called Chefchaouen. Chefchaouen is where Sheikh Shazali was born, the Shazaliya movement. My colleague who was taking me around the road, we looked at a mountain. He says, this is where Chefchaouen is. As we approached in the car, there was like a string of black, almost like ants, like nimble, on the mountain. They're moving. I said, what's this? He said, they are women. I said, what do you mean? He said, there was a huge string of women going around the road on the mountain. I said, what are they doing? He said, they are actually taking the crop from one side and they're going up to the town, to Chefchaouen. I said, why are you only women? He said, well, men are, waiting for them. So they're doing all the work and the men are not doing the work. I said, this is not right. He said, no, hold on, because they are, they're busy doing other things. He said, this is the one place when they do the inheritance. Now I'm getting involved in something which is controversial, but this is there in Chefchaouen. He says they allow, when a man dies, they consider the woman as his partner, right? They split the partnership first, and then they get the other share as a wife. This is revolutionary, absolutely revolutionary, because she's working. She was working, she was earning, she became his partner, just like if he was having a partner with another man. They would split the partnership, and then, because she is his wife, from his share, she inherits her share. This is interfering in something controversial. But I thought that in most of the fields, wherever you go in the Muslim world, until now, you find men and women are working in the fields. There's no problem with that. Hijab is maintained, but they're actually working. In the field of knowledge, this artist also has depicted how you would see men and women and Muslims and non-Muslim are actually studying and working in places like Dar al-Hikmah and some other places of learning. There were queens even in Africa. I mean, this famous lady, the queen of, the Queen Amina of Zaria, is known to have not only been a queen to rule, but she also was genius in the way of constructing fences and war zones and so in engineering. I've got this manuscript here which shows something interesting. So we're looking at sports in the Muslim history as well. We wanted to look at where does sport originate from? Did Muslims play sports? Did Indians play sports? Because we seem to know all the sports seem to be dominated by the West again. The Olympic Games, Greek, right? the flame, all Greek. And then it's a huge industry, it seemed to be all again from the West. And we are accused of only becoming imitators if you come from here or somewhere. But actually, if you look at the history of sports, you will be amazed as to how much contribution, right, other civilizations, other cultures have contributed to sports. When you talk about hockey, this picture here shows hockey. Hockey is normally associated with a game of the royals, like in the royal family in the UK. I never thought that hockey would be originating from the north of India and Afghanistan, and that there were occasions when Muslim men and Muslim women would be playing together. Each of them on their horse, and they would have competitions and so on in this manuscript. It's amazing. Right. So it shows that there was occasions in history that... Now, before I close, I've missed or lost a slide of a very important lady, and that is Al-Shifa. Al-Shifa bint Abdullah, the daughter of Abdullah. She was a companion, a Sahabiya of the Prophet ﷺ. Among some of those nurses, but she was so good, she was nicknamed as Al-Shifa. When Umar became Khalifa, he has invented the post of health and safety executive. When you do any industry today, or any building, any project, you have to have health and safety examination. Make sure that it is safe to use, right, and it is secure to use. So he appointed her as the health and safety executive over Medina. You can say al-muhtasiba over al-Medina, but muhtasiba definition in those days is different of what you now think of al-muhtasib was. Because we only link the muhtasib is to do with collection of money, right, and zakah and tax. That's not the issue. She was in charge of ensuring that medicine, the weights and measures, the buildings are all safe and correct and according to law. And he gave her the power to execute the decision. In other words, if she finds something wrong, she would lash, right? And she would, not by herself, but she would have their assistants would punish the guy who's doing the mistake. Reports straight to Umar ibn al-Khattab, and because at the time of the Sahaba in those early years, they separated the legal institution from the ruler, if she found Umar doing something wrong, she would punish him as well. That is her power. When she did so well, Medina, and I wonder how did she actually do the job? How would you have a woman in the souk of Al-Medina and so on, and such a bustling, place? At the time of Umar, Medina they were ruling the world, right? How would she first be able to, talk to people and get their examinations done and inspection? It's a question, isn't it? I'm really amazed. How did she manage to do this? If there is a psychological problem like we have today about hijab, about women talking and so on, she wouldn't have been able to do that. The relationship between men and women must have been different, right? When she did an excellent job in Medina, by that time the Muslims have conquered Iraq, opened Iraq. And Basra became a city that belongs to the government of Umar ibn al-Khattab. Basra was still a complicated city. But being a port, all sorts of things come from parts of the world. And he wants to make sure that health and safety in Basra is done right. Whom would he appoint? Ash-Shifa. She became like the governor of Basra. Right, I say this showing in the information that needs to be explored, needs to be investigated by men and women in this part of the world or elsewhere, because I think this is a very important subject. It has an impact on how we live today. Now, the ignorance comes in because, obviously, what we are taught in the school is this 1,000 years gap. This is the 1,000 years amnesia. This is a very important picture to stay in the mind, because if you really want to sort out knowledge and the information management, make sure that you have a balance and let the other nations and other cultures come to take their place. But when we say they take their place, that means you have to investigate their contributions into all walks of life. Position of women, the question of economy, the sports, science, engineering, legal, pharmaceutical, medical, and so all these contributions that have made up our civilization that we have today. Find out the historical roots, and you will find that this becomes a tenable history, sustainable history. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. I had thought that I will take a lot less time than what I have done. I hope you have enjoyed it and that I have not made blunders and committed mistakes. Please, if I did make a mistake, excuse me, because I'm not an expert on this subject. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Salim, for this fruitful and educational lecture, and I hope you all enjoyed this lecture. Now we'll open the floor for questions and answer. We'll take about 15 minutes for questions. Please try and ask questions related to today's topic, and inshallah, after 15 minutes, we'll close the floor, and we'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. So anyone has a question, please raise your hand.
Good evening, Professor Salim. With the delightful lecture that you gave us today and the review about the role of women, especially, they're all role models to us. Personally, of course, I read a lot in your lectures, and I don't really know, I don't have a question actually, Professor Salim, but I have, a comment, is that the aim, this is what I got from you, the aim of showing the role of women all through the history, in different civilization or Islamic civilization, and through different years, periods. It was the aim of this lecture is that to show that what are the positions of women and what are the roles of women in terms of, this is my question, and at the same time it's a comment. Is it contradicting with the position of women at the moment? That's what you are trying to tell us. Personally, I believe it's the problem of mentalities at the moment. At this recent time, it's the problem of mentalities. It's not the problem that women are suppressed or they're kept behind, but it's the main problem that we are suffering of is the mentality that cannot accept women to be exceeded, the mentality that cannot accept women to be, in advance. So what is your comment about that, Doctor? Thank you.
Thank you. The aim really is to bring attention to a new field of research, right? That's one. There is obviously another intention, which is the take-home message effectively, and that is that I'd like to see the young women of today, particularly in countries like Oman and others, is that they should not entirely forget about their tradition and moral code and their past and seek other role models from the West, because this can cause a huge imbalance and causes a problem and will not solve the problem. And it causes even more inferiority complex. So that, because the historical development of women, okay, it is today the position of women in Muslim countries is not acceptable, it's not good, right? Some people may disagree and say, you know, I'm quite happy with my woman and she's happy with me, so why is this a problem? No, there is a problem, because the world is not accepting it. It's going to change. The question is, how are you going to change it? Are you going to change it? And freedom means that women would have the freedom to take off their you know, hijab and their clothing and become a sex symbol. Is this, you know, do you call that freedom? Or you don't want that, and then you lock her in, and hijab means actually complete isolation and complete niqab, and even talk, even her voice is called awra and so on. You know, either this extreme or that extreme. The balance, which is the very important Islamic mechanism, it's always al-wasat, and the balance. The way Muslim society have reacted to the teachings of Quran is, you see it through the history and study what they did at the time of the Sahaba, the time later on, and say, how did women live? And you compare it and study it and see whether we can derive some examples from role models from there. I don't mean that we imitate exactly, but make use of those examples when you want to make a change. So you use the best of the past to build the future. That's what I like to see. What worries me is that in such, you know, because of the impact of modern means of communications and sudden exposure, and also the way the political tactic is happening between, you know, countries and politics and domination. Obviously, if you want to influence a certain group or a certain nation, you try to make them import your moral values and your method of thinking, and then